Close your eyes for a second. If you grew up in the right part of America, you can probably still feel it. A thick glass mug so cold your fingers stick to it the moment you pick it up. A layer of frost on the outside that starts melting the second it hits warm air. Root beer inside so cold it almost burns going down. That mug was stored at 34 degrees Fahrenheit, 1 degree above freezing. A&W kept them there on purpose because the experience of drinking from a glass that cold was the entire point. Not fast, not efficient, cold and specific, and yours. That is the company nobody talks about anymore. In 1974, A&W had 2,400 locations in the United States. More than McDonald's, more than Burger King, more than any other fast food chain in the country. The biggest restaurant franchise in American history was not the Golden Arches. It was a root beer stand that started in 1919 with a borrowed recipe and a nickel a glass. And then it was gone. Not bankrupt, not burned down, handed off, passed from owner to owner like something everyone wanted to sell and nobody wanted to run. 8 different corporate parents in 50 years, each one convinced they understood what A&W was better than the people who had built it. None of them were right. This is that story. It started with a parade. June 20th, 1919, Lodi, California. The town was throwing a homecoming celebration for its World War I veterans. A businessman named Roy Allen set up a stand on the street, filled a chest of heavy glass mugs with root beer he had bought from a retired pharmacist in Arizona, and sold cold drinks to soldiers coming home from the war. He charged 5 cents a glass. He ran out before the parade was over. The pharmacist had told Allen the formula was made from herbs, bark, berries, and spices. Allen did not know exactly what was in it, only that it was good and that people wanted more of it. He opened a second stand the following year in Stockton, a third in Sacramento. He brought in a former employee named Frank Wright to help run the operation. In 1922, they took the first letter of each last name and put it on a sign, A&W. Then Prohibition arrived and changed everything. January 1920. Every bar in America padlocked overnight. Millions of men who wanted a cold glass of something after work had nowhere to go. And here was a wooden counter with a footrail and thick frosted mugs served just like draft beer. A place that looked like a bar, felt like a bar, and served something cold and slightly bitter from a tap, minus the part that could get you arrested. Allen's timing was not genius, it was accident. But the accident could not have been more perfectly placed. By 1926, Allen and Wright were doing something almost nobody in the American food business had attempted. They were franchising. You paid a fee, you got the name, the logo, and the root beer concentrate. What you did not get was a rule book. No required building design, no standard menu, no corporate procedures. This was, depending on how you look at it, either A&W's greatest strength or the seed of its eventual destruction. We will come back to that. What matters right now is what happened in 1927, because most people do not know this part. In 1927, a 25-year-old man from Utah named J. Willard Marriott paid a fee for the rights to open A&W root beer stands in Washington, D.C. and the surrounding area. He opened a small stand and called it the Hot Shop. He added hot food to the menu. The hot food became more popular than the root beer. He kept expanding. The stands grew into restaurants. The restaurants grew into a catering operation that won a contract to feed passengers on American Airlines flights. That catering operation grew into hotels. J. Willard Marriott built one of the largest hotel companies in the world, and it started as an A&W franchise on a street corner in Washington, D.C. Nobody puts A&W on their resume for that. Through the 1950s and 1960s, A&W was defining what Friday night looked like in small-town and suburban America. You pulled into the lot, usually a big flat expanse of asphalt under a lit orange roof, and you did not get out. A car hop came to you, roller skates on, tray in hand, clipping the order speaker's metal tray to your car window. The mugs arrived cold enough to be uncomfortable to hold for more than a few seconds. The food arrived in a paper bag, and then you sat there with the engine off and watched the lot. Because the lot was the town. Everybody who was out on a Friday night ended up there eventually. You could see who was with who, what everyone was driving, who had gotten a new car, whose parents had let them out late. Nobody was performing for a camera. Nobody was checking anything. They were just out, together, in a parking lot with a cold drink. It was, looking back, the original social network. Nobody had to log in. You just had to show up. The mugs became legendary. A&W kept them so cold that the frost on the outside was not just condensation. It was actual ice, thick enough that if you set a cold mug down and picked it up again, your hand left a print in it. People loved them so much, they took them home. In purses, under jackets, tucked between seats in the backs of station wagons. There are entire online threads of adults in their 60s and 70s confessing, decades later, that they still have 2 or 3 A&W mugs in a kitchen cabinet somewhere. By some estimates, those mugs became the most shoplifted item in the history of American fast food. If you have one, you know exactly what I'm talking about. By 1960, A&W had 2,000 locations. By 1963, the company had opened in Okinawa, in Germany, in Mexico. It was the first major American fast food chain to go seriously international, and most people have never heard that either. That same year in Lansing, Michigan, a franchise owner named Dale Mulder had a regular customer who kept asking for bacon on his cheeseburger. Mulder listened. He put bacon on the cheeseburger. He put it on the menu. That is where the bacon cheeseburger was born. Not in a corporate test kitchen, not in a focus group. In a Lansing A&W, because one franchise owner was paying attention to what the person 3 feet away from him actually wanted. Dale Mulder later became president of A&W Restaurants. That detail tells you everything about what A&W was in its best years. Here is where it starts to go wrong. Roy Allen retired in 1950 and sold the company. That was the first sale. 1963, sold again. 1967, sold to United Fruit Company, the same conglomerate better known for its banana business and its involvement in Central American politics. 1970, United Fruit restructured and A&W ended up inside something called United Brands Company. The man who took over United Brands a few years later jumped out of a window of the Pan Am building in New York in 1975. That gives you some sense of the quality of stewardship available to A&W during this period. 8 different corporate owners in 50 years. Every single one arrived with a new plan. Every single one failed to understand the same thing. You cannot own a gathering place from a boardroom. You can only hollow it out. The trouble ran even deeper than the ownership carousel. Because A&W had franchised without a rule book back in 1926, it had built 2 decades of growth on individual franchisees making their own decisions. 2,000 different interpretations of what A&W was, operated by 2,000 people who had been doing things their own way for as long as they had been in business. McDonald's, meanwhile, had Ray Kroc driving across the country and forcing identical restaurants from coast to coast. Same fries, same wrappers, same experience whether you were in Topeka or Tampa. You always knew what you were getting. A&W in Idaho looked different from A&W in Ohio. The menu was different. The prices were different. The building was different. You did not know what you were getting until you got there. When corporate owners tried to introduce standards in the 1970s, many franchisees pushed back hard. Some had signed 25-year agreements that gave them significant independence. Others let their agreements expire rather than accept royalty payments and operating standards that would have cost them the autonomy they had built their businesses around. Between 1974 and 1980, A&W went from 2,400 locations to 1,300. In 6 years, they lost more than 1,000 restaurants, not to competition, to themselves. Then came the burger. In the early 1980s, a real estate developer named Alfred Taubman bought what was left of A&W and decided to take on McDonald's directly. McDonald's Quarter Pounder was a bestseller. Taubman's team developed a 1/3 of a pound burger with a bigger patty and better quality beef. Blind taste tests showed people preferred it. It cost the same price as the Quarter Pounder. He called the campaign "Third is the Word." He put it up against the quarter pounder directly.
It failed. Badly.
Taubman hired a market research firm to find out why. They ran focus groups. What they found was almost funny if it was not so instructive about how companies fail their customers. More than half the participants believed that 1/3 of a pound was less meat than 1/4 of a pound, because 3 is a smaller number than 4. 1/3 is bigger than 1/4. Every person reading this sentence right now knows that, and more than half the customers in those focus groups did not. A&W built a better burger and lost to a fraction. Taubman wrote about it later. He said the messages companies send to their customers are not always as clear as the companies believe them to be. That is a polite way of saying that you can be right about your product and still be completely wrong about your customer. And that gap between those two things is where a lot of businesses die. The chain dropped below 500 locations by the mid-1980s. The momentum was gone. In 2002, Yum Brands acquired A&W along with Long John Silver's. Yum was not wrong about what the problems were. They diagnosed almost everything correctly. The drive-in model required large lots, dedicated car hop staffing, fresh brewed root beer equipment, and thousands of heavy glass mugs that kept walking out the door in people's jacket pockets. The rest of fast food had moved to drive-thrus and smaller suburban footprints. The economics of the old A&W model no longer made sense on paper. So, Yum optimized. They co-branded A&W locations with KFC. 2 chains, 1 building, 1 kitchen, 1 window. They switched the root beer from fresh brewed to bag-and-box concentrate. They phased out the glass mugs and replaced them with paper cups. They folded the menu into the background of someone else's restaurant and called it a strategy. Every one of those decisions made sense on a spreadsheet. I want to be clear about that. None of them were stupid from a cost reduction standpoint. None of them showed up on a spreadsheet as what they actually were, which was the systematic removal of every specific thing that made an A&W worth the detour. You cannot combine an A&W with a KFC and get an A&W. You get a kitchen trying to run 2 completely different menus at once and doing neither particularly well. You cannot fill a bag with concentrate, run it through a nozzle, and pour it into a paper cup and hand someone the same thing as a 34-degree frosted glass mug. The number of ounces is the same. The experience is something different entirely. What you cannot measure on a spreadsheet is whether a person wants to stay for 20 minutes after the food is gone. And the entire history of A&W at its best is the history of a place where people wanted to stay. 7 straight years of declining sales followed the Yum acquisition. During that same period, A&W Canada, which had been split off in 1972 and then bought outright by its own management team in 1995 when they refused to let Unilever shut it down, was doing exactly the opposite. Over 1,000 locations, growing every year. Second largest burger chain in the country behind only McDonald's. Same brand, same root beer, same mugs, different ownership, different result. The difference was not the product. It was whether the people running it understood what they were actually selling. In December 2011, something unusual happened. A group of A&W franchisees, the actual people who ran the actual restaurants, formed a company called A Great American Brand LLC. And they bought A&W back from Yum Brands. Not a private equity firm, not a hedge fund, not a Silicon Valley group with a turnaround thesis. The people who poured the root beer. The chairman of the National A&W Franchise Association said afterward that they were excited to be on our own and away from Yum Brands' control. That quote does not sound like a press release. It sounds like someone exhaling after holding their breath for 9 years. Fresh brewed root beer came back. The frosted mugs came back. The menu was rebuilt around 100% American-raised beef. They reintroduced the 1/3 of a pound burger. This time they called it the 3/9 pound burger. Same weight, different denominator. 3 out of 9. Math you can work with. They made a joke of it. They leaned directly into the famous failure from 30 years earlier and dared Americans to get the fraction right this time. The campaign got coverage everywhere because it was funny and because it was honest. Same-store sales climbed every year after the buyback. Average revenue per location rose nearly 50% in a decade. As of early 2025, there are around 500 A&W restaurants across the United States, and they are growing again. It is not 2,400. It will never be 2,400 again. But it belongs to people who care about it, and that turns out to matter more than the number. A&W is older than sliced bread, older than the NFL, older than every other fast food chain in the country. It survived Prohibition, the Depression, 2 world wars, and 8 corporate owners who each tried to turn it into something it was not built to be. The reason it nearly disappeared is not that the product got worse. It is that the people in charge kept confusing a product with a place. A product is something you consume. A place is somewhere you go to linger. You can optimize a product. You can measure it and standardize it and strip it down to its most efficient form. You cannot optimize a parking lot full of people on a Friday night who have nowhere else they need to be. Every version of A&W that worked, from Roy Allen's stand in Lodi to Dale Mulder's Lansing franchise to the buyback owners running it today, understood that the root beer was not really the point. The cold mug was the point. The car hops roller skates were the point. The fact that you could sit there for an hour and watch the town go by was the point. The moment that got optimized away was the moment A&W stopped being a reason to show up. The reason most people do not talk about A&W is not that they forgot. It is that what they miss is not really a restaurant. It is a version of a Friday night that does not exist anymore. And saying you miss a Friday night is harder than just saying you miss a burger. Tell me in the comments if you had an A&W near you growing up, and whether you still have one of those mugs. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one.